Welcome to Engaged in Conversation, the podcast from Engaged Solutions Group.
Richard, thank you for coming to our studio this morning. It's
No
great
problem.
to see you again. I thought it'd be really useful if you just obviously introduce yourself and talk a bit about your wonderful organisation, your national company that you run, and just give us an overview of what you're doing there at the moment.
So my name is Richard Fraser. I'm the CEO of Frenkel Topping Group. We've been around in Manchester for 40 years now. We originated in 1979 as a forensic accountancy practice. So there was a John Frenkel, there was a Mike Topping, and they specialise in providing litigation support for lawyers and barristers who are dealing with large value personal injury and medical negligence claims. So these are catastrophic injuries. These are very serious spinal injuries, brain injuries. And that's how the business started. They provided the forensic accountancy support, and then as the business developed, we then got involved on the investment side as an independent financial advisor. And in 1989, we actually did the very first in the United Kingdom what was called a structured settlement. So if somebody gets their damages, that's paid as a lump sum. Once you get the lump sum, though, you've got the risk of inflation, investment risk, longevity. Will your damages last as long as you do? Which is a problem for people. What the structured settlement did was to take part of the damages and give the claimant tax-free income for the rest of their life. So this was a case of Kathy Kelly. Kathy was a nurse. She was involved in a very serious accident. She was left in a coma and her husband was killed. Kathy's life expectation in 1984 was 15 years, so to 1999. By putting the structured settlement in place, we guaranteed her income for the rest of her life. Kathy actually died at Easter 2019, 20 years after her expected life expectation, and if we'd not had the structure, her damages would have run out many, many years ago. But what this did was it gave us a foothold into this whole personal injury and clinical negligence marketplace. What happens to somebody pre-settlement? The whole litigation process. Because in the United Kingdom, what the law says is you will be put back in the same financial position you would have been but for the accident. So we don't have these huge pecuniary losses here like they do in America. You hear about somebody going into McDonald's, they get scalding coffee on the knee and they get $13 million. Doesn't happen here. You just put back in the same financial position. So we've been involved for the last 30 years building our brand as Frenkel Topping by providing litigation support pre-settlement. So we do loss of earnings reports, pension loss reports, and we do a report at the settlement to say, well, what should be tax-free income and what should be a lump sum. The whole point of what we're trying to do is to become the trusted advisor, so when the client gets their damages, we instructed to look after the assets, and we now have circa £1.2 billion that we look after our clients, managed on a very conservative basis. We have a 99% retention ratio of our clients, which we're very, very proud of, because having got them as a client, we just don't want to lose them. So our commitment to the service and looking after them is paramount to what we do.
Do you think that the transition through COVID is here to stay? Because it's been a very traditional face-to-face environment, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
People wearing suits and ties and that whole kind of, especially in your financially regulated, slightly different to maybe the SRA regulation in legal. How have you seen that changing, and what do you think is here to stay from that journey?
Well, you only have to look at me, right? I left school at 18, 42 years. I've been institutionalised. I got up in the morning, put a shirt, tie, suit on, went to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. I firmly believe as CEO I had to be seen to be the first one in the morning, last one to leave in the evening. Sat in traffic for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in an evening. COVID hit, and I honestly thought I'd struggle. And actually, from a personal perspective, one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because I understood now you don't have to be in the office. You don't have to be there all the time. I'm dressed. I haven't worn a suit properly for many months now. I mean, when I go to the city and I'm presenting, I do. And sometimes if I've got a meeting in the office, I will. But now we're all dressed like this, far more relaxed. We have flexible working in the office. We're using technology far more. But I think there's a long, long way for us to go. I think both with the lawyers, and I know one of the SRA's directives to try and get them to digitalise and to use technology, and we're exactly the same. We are outdated with the way that we interact with our clients, the way we interact with our staff. Hence one of the reasons why we're engaging with Engage Solutions, because we fundamentally believe that we have to get better at how we get our message and communicate out both to our staff, our stakeholders and the staff, but also our clients as well.
And that's a cultural transformation almost, isn't it? If you've got people that have been offering financial advice to clients for 20 years in their suits and ties, all of a sudden, are people comfortable giving regulated financial advice now in jeans and T-shirts? I mean, is it kind of, how far does it go?
Well, it's interesting, actually, because occasionally going back, when I used to fee, and I don't fee anymore, but when I did, I would get a lawyer sometimes saying to me, look, don't turn up in your suit today, because of it would be far better if you just turn up in jeans and a T-shirt.
Yeah.
So I suppose you're just taking that, it's just each time you just look at the individual you're dealing with and talk to the lawyer. And if they feel it's appropriate for you to go suited and booted, fine. But a lot of the time, most people today don't. They get frightened. They get intimidated by the man turning up in the suit and tie. Yeah. They'd rather see somebody dressed like this. They feel far more comfortable and open when you speak to people like that.
Yeah. Talk me through then some of the headline challenges, some of the engagement challenges, I guess, that you've faced.
Yeah, I think the big thing now for us is integration. We've got 12 brands within the group now covering many, many different services. So how do we integrate that? But more important, how do we communicate? How do we get our message out to 300 and odd staff and to have the values, the what we fundamentally is our culture? How do we get that out to all our clients? Culturally, everybody we engaged with had to fit into the way we saw the world. And if they didn't, then we didn't continue with them, because I don't want that. I want people who are engaged, understand ultimately who we're looking after, which is some of the most vulnerable people in our society. They've had a life-changing, catastrophic event either to themselves, husband, wife, children, and having to deal with somebody who's disabled is hard enough without all that then goes around it with the litigation process, and then ultimately having £500,000, 1, 2, 3 million pounds to invest, which has then got to last for the lifetime to provide the care requirements, the physiotherapy, the occupational therapy, the equipment they need for the rest of their life on an uncertain life expectation. So the people had to buy into who and what we are and who ultimately we look after.
And to try and achieve that sense of joined up purpose and being, I suppose, culturally, you've got some values, haven't you? Do you want to just share how you came about those values and how you bring them to life?
Yeah, I mean, it's an evolving process, isn't it? As you go through, and we've started on another journey, which is B Corps, B Corporation. I don't know if you've heard of B Corps, but we've started that to sort of show, exactly what our values are, which is to respect each other, to make sure you deal with each other, your commitment, your loyalty. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. You principle. I'm a man of my word, a man of principles, and I always have been. I've always said to people, I will treat with your utmost respect. You'll never lie to me, because the moment you lie to me, you have a problem. And even if you make a mistake, be honest about it, because if you've made a mistake, we can deal with it. We can sort it out. The moment you start to try and cover that mistake up and start to lie, that's when problems start. And it's just about that respect as human beings to you, to each other, to our staff, to our clients, and the solicitors we deal with.
That's great. And when you've got the growth that you've had, 12 different businesses spread across the UK, how do you, obviously a lot of those businesses have been trading for many years, haven't they? And they're quite established in their brands. And you've kept most of those brands in play, haven't you? Certainly for now. I don't know what your strategy is moving forward. But so it comes with that, lots of different cultures, I suppose, lots of different challenges. How have you found integrating that so quickly?
Well, it's a challenge, and it's an ongoing challenge. That is part of what we're trying to do now as we move forward, and part of that solution is engaging with the Engage app and helping that communication. And you're right, there are different cultures within there, and the businesses have gone for a long time. We have a regular newsletter that goes out, FT United, which on a monthly basis, which tells everybody in the group what's happening. We celebrate promotions, we celebrate wins, exam successes throughout the whole group. And we also have an annual conference when we bring everybody together to share our values. Integration needs to be ongoing, because everybody needs to feel the part of the group as a whole. And we have a lot of plans for what we want to get to in the future.
I suppose it's such a hard world in which you operate, really, because if you look at the individuals, your clients, so to speak, there's a real story behind each one of those, which is quite powerful and emotional, isn't it? I mean, is that hard for your team to be exposed to that all the time?
Yes. The reason I'm sat here today is my brother broke his back when he was 18, in 1988. Fell out of his first year at Newcastle University, fell out of a window and broke his back. So he's been in a wheelchair now for over 30 years.
Wow.
To this day, my mum cannot look at a photograph of our Andrew pre-accident. And that's 30 odd years later, or what might have been. He had a very successful career. He joined the Inland Revenue Graduate Fast Track Scheme. He was, in fact, the Senior Inland Revenue Advisor to Gordon Brown's budget of 99 and 2000, but had to retire at 48 because he started to get really bad arthritis in his shoulders, and if his shoulders went, then that's his independence gone. So that's just one of the effects of using your shoulders as your legs for 20 odd years. So I've seen what happens to a family when you get that, because effectively I became the parent because my mum and dad just couldn't cope. I was 28 at the time. And they just crumbled. So I stepped in and became parent instead of son. So it had an effect on me. And in fact, to this day, my wife says to me, the reason I don't get upset about anything is because I suppressed a lot of emotion at the time of the accident. And a lot of particularly some of our fiancees have got, so Steve's got a cerebral palsy brother. So a lot of our clients, Claire's got an autistic child. So a lot of have gone through and understand what the emotion and the trauma around a family member, close family member that has something catastrophic happens to them.
Wow. So in a way, it's a sense of cohesion, isn't it? It's a sense of bringing you together with a shared experience.
That's right. And the one thing I always say to all our staff is never ignore the individual. Even if they don't know who you are, just touch the hand on their arm and say, hi, Peter, Sally, whatever, really nice to meet you. And I'm here to look after your money, but I'm going to speak to your mum and dad about it. You've got to acknowledge that individual.
One of the things that I suppose is do you foster a sense of community within your clients, because they're all having that shared experience?
Yeah.
I know everyone is different, hugely different. Yeah. But is there anything that connects them together? Is there an opportunity to?
I think there's a huge opportunity to do that. We so our mantra in the business is life after life changing events. But I think there is to share what's happened. So to give you an example, one of our clients, Ellie, who's 17 now, was misdiagnosed with meningitis at 15 months old. So she's a quadruple amputee, the elbows and the knees. Ellie won a silver medal at the Beijing Olympics and the Paralympics last September. She's the most inspirational young woman I have ever met in my life. She just gets on with it. I've got a season... Unfortunately, at the moment, I've got a season ticket at Old Trafford, which is not the greatest place to be. But her and her dad are Arsenal fans, so I took them to the game. And I think the opportunity to share stories like that into the wider community, absolutely. And it's one of our aspirations of part of what we're doing now, this whole engagement with our clients to create that community.
Yeah. So I mean, I talk a lot about the 3 C's of engagement, the audiences that matter most to a business. And they are your colleagues, your customers, and that wider sense of community. Getting communities engaged on your brand. And I think you're a really good example where there's so much potential on that last C, the community, that sense of being, that sense of togetherness, and also providing a safe space for those individuals to interact and engage together. Because that's often missing. With mainstream social media, it's very hard to create those safe private spaces. So
I totally agree with you, on the 3 C's, and I think we would very much like to create that community within both our, internally but externally as well. What we really need is people engaging, so that it's coming from everybody in the business of things that are happening. One of the things we do, for example, within the group is have you heard of Mary Seacole, the nurse? So she was a very famous black nurse and helped to nurse in the UK. And there's a statue down in Richmond, but there's a garden in Leeds, and we helped to maintain the Mary Seacole garden, and our staff are doing that constantly. There's up in Salford here, there's the Brain and Spinal Injuries Charity Basic, which we getting heavily involved in. There's opportunity to volunteer there and help them. That, and I think that can be driven by our staff. Getting them engaged. So rather than it all coming effectively from the top down, it comes more from the bottom up, and so it becomes everybody's communication tool, not just ours in management.
Yeah. So if you have a kind of visionary magic wand in, say, 5 or 10 years' time, where do you see Frenkel Topping being? What's the vision for the business?
So where I'd like to see is I think technology and the use, we're so far behind. I think that we need to have, what the last 2 years has taught me is the digitalisation of the business, the communication, how we engage with both, like you said, internal staff, our clients and the community, is to create a group so we are seen and it doesn't matter whether you've got a personal injury claim or not. If you've got anything that you need when it comes to a disability, we're the first port of call. Our brand is known throughout the UK that we have a platform there, and whether it's a wheelchair, whether it's a hoist, whether it's physiotherapy, occupational therapy, whether it's an adapted car, whether it's getting your tax return done, a holiday, whatever you need, our platform is the place to go to find that information, whether it's from a charitable end, whether it's from a litigation end, it's irrelevant. That you can come and find that out, and that brand is known throughout the whole of the UK as the place to go to find that information. So that's the vision.
I love that, and it's such an authentic and purposeful vision to have, isn't it, for society and in general, and I think that's fantastic. On that note, is this a UK only thing, or could you see this extending into other territories?
There are some territories around the world that have a similar system. India and Australia particularly, but I think there's so much to be done in the UK. To be honest with you. I think we just focus on getting that, bringing all that together, and just trying to work more towards this cohesion, particularly between social care and NHS, for example. I know Andy Burnham here in Manchester has got one of his election mantras was to try and get that joined up approach from, because you've been in hospital, you've been in a major trauma centre. I'll give you an example, right? So one of the things we do, because we do work in NHS, our charitable foundation gives each of the major trauma advisors a debit card with £3,000 on it. Because only circa 25 to 30% of the people who go into the major trauma centre will ever have a claim. 60%, 65% don't. You wouldn't believe what people haven't got enough to buy pajamas to go home in. The wife has to decide, do I put food on the table for the children, or do I get a taxi to see my husband who's lying up? It is quite unbelievable. Only the other week we had an older gentleman who had a very severe leg injury, was losing a lot of blood. Stabilised him quite quickly, but his injuries to his legs meant he couldn't climb stairs. The family couldn't afford to buy a single bed to put in a room downstairs so he could go home. So because the advisor had our charitable debit card, they bought him a bed, so it got him home to his family, but freed up a bed for for him to go home. So I think there's so much to do around this whole engagement between what happens to somebody. You then extend it into the elderly and how the elderly are looked after. Between social, and there is so much to do in this country.
I love what you're saying, and I totally agree. And I think I'm involved in another organisation called Vocal, and that's very much about strengthening the voice of business leaders and the business community in the UK. And I think that there's a lot of talk around that transitioning into government and that interplay between the business world and how we can impact the wider community and the wider sense of what we can do, how we can impact the greater good, if you like.
I went to, a couple of years ago, June 19, I went to one of the World Business Forums down in London, and I can't remember the chapter, but he was a Harvard professor talking. And he actually said, the only way change will come, whether that is through socially making change or environmental change, it's not going to come from non-for-profit organisations. It will not come from governments. It will come from business and business leaders who understand and coming together and don't realise it's not all about profitability of the business, and it's about what happens. And on that note, what's been really interesting in the last 2 years for me is, prior to COVID, it was the old Jerry Maguire film. When I went to speak to investors, show me the money. That's all they were interested in. What's your balance sheet? What's your cash position? What's your EBITDA? What's your earnings per share? That has changed quite dramatically in the last 2 years, and we get asked more and more about our culture, our values, our clients, and so much so that I did coin the phrase which seemed to go down quite well, that we are actually caring capitalists, that we are capitalists and we're there to make money for ourselves, but we care about what we do. We have a reason, our reason why for what we do is very, very strong.
Yeah, and that's really obvious listening to you today and looking at what your business is doing. So really, honestly, congratulations for that.
Thank
and
you.
I think if we if all the other business leaders out there could do that, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? Because it really would make a huge difference.
Maybe we could start a movement.
Maybe we should, yeah.
Yes.
And I think on that note, Richard, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and your experiences today. Thank you very much.
No problem. Enjoyed it. Thank you.